We're going to talk about how to find the surface area of a cylinder. And so what's a cylinder? A cylinder is essentially a can. So for example, here's a can of beans, and so this is in the shape of a cylinder. It has a circle on the top and the bottom, and then around on the sides. And so when we're talking about surface area, so remember, area is where essentially we want to cover something, or you can think of painting something. So the surface area is if we wanted to paint this can, so we wanted to paint the top, the bottom, and all around the sides, how much paint would we need? That's essentially a question you can think about when you think about surface area. So the surfaces, which include the top and the bottom, and all around. And we're talking about area. So in this formula, so this is on the formula sheet, so you don't need to actually memorize it, but you need to understand it and to be able to manipulate the formula. For a cylinder, it's 2 pi RH, so that's 2 times pi. Pi is a number, it's 3.14. We just write pi as this symbol, but it's 3.14. That's also on your formula sheet. R means radius, and H means height. So if you're talking about the radius, you're looking at the top, the circle. The radius goes from the center out. If you haven't watched the videos on circles, there's 3 videos on my Facebook page regarding circles that I did in May of 2015. So you need to watch those if you don't understand what radius, diameter, circumference, and area of circles are. The second part, so you take that, so the height is just going to be the height of the cylinder, plus 2 times pi times radius squared. So if you don't know what exponents are, you need to watch that video. So r squared, radius squared, means radius times radius. It does not mean radius times 2. It's radius times radius. So if we look at this formula, we need to understand what it's about. So remember what we're doing. We're going to paint the can. So we're going to paint the top and the bottom and all around it. So if you look at this, if you just look at pi r squared, so you should recognize that as being the area of a circle. So pi r squared is the area of a circle. So if we're given the radius of this top, we can find the area of this circle by pi r squared. Why is there a 2 here? Because we have 2 circles that we have to paint. So this is pi r squared is the area of the top. We're multiplying it by 2 because we have 2 of them. That's what this part of the formula means. It's the top and the bottom of the cylinder. Now, this part is going to give us the area around the cylinder. And so if we look at this, so here we have a can. If we remove the label, so essentially we want to paint the label, right? Because we're painting all around. So if we unhook it and we spread it out, what do we have? The label is really in the form of a rectangle, right? So all around we have it, but when we just split it and we unfold it to paint this, we can think of it as a rectangle. What's the area of a rectangle? Well, it's length times width. The width is the side, the length is the bottom. So essentially what we're going to find is, how do we find the area of this rectangle? That's the surface area around. So how do we find how long the length is? Well, if you know anything about circles, what is the length around the circle? That's called the circumference. Again, if you don't know that, you need to watch those videos. The length around a circle is called the circumference. When we peel this off, then, that is the length of this triangle, is the circumference of this circle. What's the formula for circumference? 2 times pi times radius. Look on your formula sheet if you don't know that. 2 times pi times radius is going to give you the circumference of the circle, which is going to give you the length of that rectangle. And then the height is the edge here. And so if you think of this as a rectangle, length times width, the length is 2 pi r, and the width is the height. And so that's what this means when we're figuring out this formula. So this is on your formula sheet, but again, it helps to understand what exactly these mean and what the parts are. So this is finding the area of the top and the bottom. This is find the area all around, or the label of the can. So let's do some example problems. So let's say we have a cylinder. The radius is 8 inches. The height is 12 inches. What is the surface area? So we just plug these into the formula. So we just copy this down. Surface area equals 2 times pi. Pi is 3.14. You don't even have to memorize that because it's on the formula sheet. It's just a number, but we use that symbol. Times the radius. R means the radius. R is 8. Times the height. The height is 12. Remember, when you write things with parentheses around them, that just means that you're multiplying. Plus 2 times pi, so 2 times 3.14, times the radius squared, so 8 squared. Okay? So all we did is we took the formula, plugged the numbers in, and now we're going to get our calculator out. So what is 2 times 3.14 times 8 times 12? If you do that, you're going to get 602.88. What is 2 times 3.14 times 8 times 8? That's what 8 squared is. If you do that, you're going to get 401.92. 602.88 plus 401.92 in total is 1004.8. And the units on surface area is just like any area problem, is squared. So if this is in inches, it's going to be inches squared. So that's the answer to that question. Now let me tell you, sometimes they might leave the answer in your multiple choice in terms of pi. I don't want you to be confused by that. So we're going to do the same problem, but leave the answer in terms of pi. So instead of using 3.14, we're just going to leave the symbol pi there. So surface area equals 2 times pi, but instead of multiplying out, we're just going to leave pi there, times the radius, which is 8, times the height, which is 12, plus 2 times pi times the radius squared, which is 8 squared. So here we just multiply the numbers, but we don't multiply pi. So 2 times 8 times 12. If you put that into your calculator, you have 2 times 8 times 12 is 192, and then we leave the pi on there. So we just move it down. We multiply the numbers, but leave pi there. Plus, what's 2 times 8 times 8? So if you do 2 times 8 times 8, that is 128, and we leave the pi there. And to get your answer, you just add the numbers. So 192 plus 128 is going to give you 320 pi. So if your answer is left in, it's called in terms of pi, where pi is there, you don't actually use the 3.14. You just kind of leave pi in and keep carrying it through. And so if in your calculator you multiply 320 times 3.14, because that's what pi is, you'll see that you get this answer. But if the answer is left in terms of pi, this is how you do it. You just leave the symbol pi there, and you just work with the numbers. Alright, let's do another problem. So here, let's say we have the diameter is, so the diameter is 12 feet and the height is 5 feet. What is the surface area? So remember, so this is how they're going to trick you, is they're giving you the diameter, but you want the radius. So remember that the radius is half of the diameter. So we use the same formula, 2 times pi, we're going to actually multiply the pi out, times the radius. So don't put 12 in there because the radius is only half of that. 6 times the height, plus 2 times pi times radius squared. Again, remember the radius is 6, so times 6 squared. So if you multiply this out, 2 times 3.14 times 6 times 5, you're going to get 188.4. 2, I should have written this, 3.14 instead of pi is 2 times 3.14 times 6 squared. If you multiply that out, you're going to get 226.08. So, in the end, if you add these two numbers together, 188.4 plus 226.08, you're going to get 414.48. And remember, this is in feet, and the units are squared. 414.48 square feet is the answer to this problem. We're going to do one more that is going to be a little bit more complicated because they might not be as straightforward as this, is where they give you, the radius or diameter and the height, but they may require you to do a little bit of algebra. So if you haven't watched the algebra videos, you need to do that as well. So let's do one where it's going to be a little bit more complicated, and they're going to require some algebra. It does not come off very good. Okay, so let's say we have the radius is 7, the surface area is 659.4, and we'll say that this is in feet squared. So we'll say feet squared. So the question is, find the height of the cylinder. So we're not trying to find the surface area, they're giving us the surface area. They want us to find the height, find h. So this is going to be essentially an algebra problem. So the way that we set it up is just we follow the formula. So surface area equals 659.4, so we plug that in for surface area. Equals 2 times pi, 3.14, times the radius. They gave us the radius is 7, times the height. That's what we don't know, so we just leave it as an h. Plus 2 times pi, which is 3.14, times the radius squared, so that's 7. So 7 squared, I'm just going to write that down as 49. But remember, that's radius squared. 7 times 7 is 49. So we're just following the formula. Okay, so once we get here, let's write this out. So we would actually multiply the numbers together. So 2 times 3.14 times 7 is 43.96 times the height. So we're still trying to figure out the height is, so we just leave it as h. 2 times 3.14 times 49 is 307.72. You just plug that into your calculator. And so now we have an algebra problem where we're trying to solve for h. So how do we do that? We first get rid of 307.72 by subtracting it from both sides. So 659.4 minus 307.72 gives us 351.68. So if you don't know how to solve algebra problems, you need to watch that video. But to get rid of this 307, we subtract 307. If we subtract 307 on this side, we have to subtract it on this side. So 659.4 minus 307.72 leaves us with 351.68. And then this just stays the same. Now we're going to solve for the height. So how do we solve for the height? To get rid of the 43.96, we divide by 43.96. If we divide one side by 43.96, we have to divide the other side by 43.96. So you plug this in your calculator. What is 351.68 divided by 43.96? And you get 8. This will cancel. You're left with h. So your height equals 8. So height equals 8 feet. And that's the answer to that question.